Hello everyone, Joel Tadman here from Golf Monthly, and in this video we are counting down the 10 biggest problems that all golfers can relate to. Now at this point I need to remind you to click the subscribe button to the Golf Monthly YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our videos. Make sure you click the like button if you like what you're watching, and also comment on the video. Tell me if there's any problems that we've missed in this video. I'd love to hear from you. But for now, let's head out onto the golf course here at Burley Park Golf Club in Stamford, Lincolnshire, and count down the 10 biggest problems that golfers have to deal with, starting with playing partners offering advice. We've all got that one person in our four-ball who watches one instructional video on YouTube and suddenly he thinks he's Butch Harmon. And while I'm sure they mean well, I do have two main issues with this problem. The first is that this person is almost certainly no better qualified than any other Tom, Dick or Harry to dish out swing advice, and therefore I would advise you to take it with a pretty heavy pinch of salt. And the second issue I have is that people really shouldn't be giving advice during the round. Fair enough if they want to offer some sort of tip or a bit of feedback after the round, because if you do it during the round, that can really play havoc with your mind. You start to think about it during your swing and it can have an adverse effect on the shots that you hit afterwards. So my advice to you would be that if you are thinking about giving advice, really think about whether it's necessary, and if you're on the receiving end of some advice, maybe just politely ask them to wait until after the round to give you that advice, and hopefully you won't have to experience this problem that much out on the course. Now, the next problem on our list refers to putting on temporary greens like this one or holotying greens. Now I'm of course aware that temporary greens are important to maintain the integrity of the actual playing surfaces in wintry conditions, but it is a frustrating problem. You see the pins in the fairways 20 yards short of the green, you get that instant deflation knowing that you're going to be playing on some pretty substandard surfaces, let's be honest. Yeah, the surfaces are a lot bobbly, they're a lot longer, and it really is difficult to judge the consistency of the roll and hole out from short range. And the level of ice and frost that thaws during the round is really difficult to judge when you're pitching and chipping onto those greens. Sometimes you get a really firm bounce that shoots over the green, and sometimes it digs into a soft patch. It's impossible to judge. And the other problem I have with temporary greens especially is that it really does equalise the kind of handicap. So the high handicappers have much more of an advantage because the course is a lot shorter, and the skill that is required for chipping and putting is taken out of it from the lower handicappers. It is more luck based, so really high handicappers do have a much bigger advantage when playing on temporary greens. Similar for holotying greens, to be fair, although you are as likely to see a putt bubble back online as you are offline. Hopefully they kind of even itself out during the course of a round. That's just another problem that golfers have to deal with, unfortunately, out on the course. So the next problem golfers have to face relates to the rules of the game, and I would say golf, compared to pretty much every other sport out there, has one of the most complicated sets of rules. And USGA and the R&A have made some changes for this year, attempting to make them simpler, but even then the players edition of the rule book has 24 different categories over 120 pages, so it's going to be impossible for golfers to know every single rule. For example, I've hit my ball in this penalty area, now it's called. It's got red stakes. How are they different to yellow stakes? And you start dropping it from shoulder height, and then you realise you've got to change to knee height. There's an awful lot to remember, and obviously we're playing an outdoor sport, and your ball can get in a whole host of different scenarios, and there's been situations where I've been asking my playing partners for advice and none of them know what the actual rule is. So it's an incredibly frustrating problem that golfers have. They'll end up calling the pro shop asking for advice, shuffling through the pages of their rule book, maybe going on the app, which is really good by the way, but still can be difficult to find the ruling that you want. So my advice to you would be try and learn kind of the basic ones, the simpler one that you're going to be experiencing most out on the golf course. The Golf Monthly YouTube channel has some great rules videos that you should definitely check out to swat up on your knowledge, and if you do that, hopefully you won't face these problems and you'll become the John Paramore of your four-ball. Right, so the next problem on our list relates to lessons, which will usually take place on a driving range, as you can see here. And the big problem golfers often have with lessons is the fact that often they make you play worse before you play better. Now, I am not for one second advocating the idea that golfers shouldn't have lessons. Lessons are really important to improve your golf, and they're definitely the fastest way of improving your golf over things like club changes or other methods. But the problem with lessons is that you have that phase of unfamiliarity with a swing change. So maybe you change your grip or your posture or your swing plane, and there is that inevitable kind of transition period where you're going from your old swing to your new swing, where everything feels alien, it feels strange. And on the golf course, you feel like you're not even going to make contact with the golf ball, let alone hit a good shot. And often golfers fall into the trap of going back to their old ways just because it feels comfortable for them. Obviously, my bit of advice for you around lessons would be to really stick with it, have a plan, and really accept the fact that maybe your results out on the golf course aren't going to improve straight away. There is that period of bedding them in, getting them ingrained so that they feel more natural. And if you do that, hopefully those changes will then produce better, more consistent results. Also think about when you have lessons. So maybe peak height of summer isn't the best time to do it because that's when all the competitions and you're going to be playing a lot more golf. So think about having lessons during the off season and don't space them too close together. Give yourself a few weeks apart so you can really work on it and embed it in time for your next lesson. If you do that, hopefully you won't experience the problem of lessons making you worse before you get better. Right, so the next problem that golfers often face relates to leaving stuff behind without you realising. There's a lot of things that can potentially fall off. For example, your rangefinder, if you haven't zipped it up properly, might fall out of its holder. You drop your towel, the head cover might fall off. Or the most common one is you've taken a wedge up with your putter to do a chip by the green here, you hole out, you walk off without realising you've left your wedge by the side of the green. You might only realise that you've done it, say 4 or 5 holes later when you come to use that wedge for your next shot. And obviously there's 2 problems there. The first problem is you haven't got that wedge that you really like to use for that next shot, and therefore you have to use a different one you're unfamiliar with, and the performance and the results could suffer as a result. But then you've got the other problem, the fact that you're worrying about where that club is, who's got it, whether they're going to hand it in a pro shot, whether they're going to try and give it to you during the round, and that can affect your concentration and affect the quality of your shots after that. Obviously the problem is compounded even more by the fact that product is often worth quite a lot of money, and you're kind of worrying about whether you're even going to get it back at all. But hopefully, you know, you would rely on the good nature of your fellow members, that they would try and give it to you or hand it back in the pro shop afterwards. Often golfers will get into a bit of a flap and a panic and start waving at people frantically 2 fairways across in some sort of unwritten awful golfing code as to, have you got my club or towel or whatever it is you've dropped? And it all can get a bit embarrassing. But you know, the problem that golfers face, it is annoying, but I guess the moral of the story is try and keep track of all your bits of kit, and hopefully your playing partners will spot it if you have dropped something behind. Right, so the next problem relates to winter mats. Now, I know they are there to preserve the integrity of the actual tees and they are in use during the winter months, but there's a lot of problems I have with winter mats. The first is that they generally get a lot of wear and tear, and they can become quite muddy and therefore quite slippy, which is not what you want when you're trying to hit a drive. But my main issue with winter mats is how it can be very difficult to get the correct tee height for the club that you're using. Now, obviously, a lot of golfers have different tricks on this, and there are a lot of different heights of tee you can use. So for example, I use this pink castle tee for my driver. It's the perfect height for it. So if you can get it in the ground fully, then that's problem solved. But if you're hitting, so for example, this hole is a risk reward par 4 here at Burley Park, the 4th hole, and I like to hit a 3-wood. So I need to get the ball teed up ever so slightly, but it can be quite difficult to do it, especially if the mats are quite firm as they are at the moment. You can get these very small castle tees, which are ideal, but they only work if you can actually get the tee physically in the mat, which can be very difficult. My advice to you would be try and use holes that have been previously used, and don't go forward with the shot if the ball isn't teed up to the correct height, because you'll only end up either roofing the shot and putting a horrible mark on the top of your club if you've got it teed up too high. And if you give up altogether and use off the mat, especially on a par 3 and you like to use a tee with your irons and you give up and don't use a tee, then you probably end up thinning it or hitting a pretty bad shot. So persevere with it, invest in some very small green castle tees like I've got here, and hopefully this won't be a problem for you. Right, so the next problem golfers face is a pain so excruciating I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies. It is the dreaded ankle bash, where you knock your putter head against the little bone that sticks out on the side of your ankle. I would liken the pain to standing on an upturned plug or a piece of Lego in barefoot. It's that bad, and really something you want to try and avoid because it can leave you hobbling around the side of the green. It often happens also if you're in the bunker. Maybe you've played your bunker shot and you're tapping the sole of your shoe to get the sand out of your cleats, and then suddenly you miss your shoe and the club strikes that part of your ankle. So my only advice to you would be to be very careful where you swing your wedge or your putter. Right, the next problem that golfers face comes in the bunker, and specifically if you're playing on a dry, windy day, often the sand, when you're hitting a bunker shot, will pop up, and if you're hitting into the wind, it will then fly back right into your face, and that can be a really uncomfortable situation. You get sand in your eyes, it's incredibly painful, but also the sand can get down your top and it gets very, very itchy in all sorts of different places, and it's very, very uncomfortable and difficult to shake off. You find yourself walking funnily in the next few holes, trying to shake it out and get it all out of the areas where it feels uncomfortable. I guess my only advice to overcome that problem is to turn away as quickly as you can. So you hit the shot, you know the sand's going to be blowing into your face. Obviously don't turn away too soon, you need to hit the shot properly, but then just kind of turn away. Hopefully the sand won't get into those places where you don't want it to, but that's the best advice I can do, I'm afraid. It's a problem golfers have to experience sometimes, unfortunately, out on the course. Now, the next problem that golfers have to deal with relates to these premium golf balls. Now, we all know if you want the best performing golf ball, you have to pay a premium price. For example, this Titleist Pro V1X golf ball that I play comes in at around about £50 per dozen, which equates to just over £4 a golf ball, which in the grand scheme of things is quite a lot of money when you consider how long these balls potentially last. We've all done it. We've pegged up a brand new Pro V1X on the first tee. That brilliant white finish is gleaming back at you, and then you hit a raging snap hook into the cabbage or the out of bounds, never to be seen again. And that £4 golf ball has lasted literally 10 seconds. Of course, Titleist have less expensive offerings that might well be worth considering, but if you don't want to go down that route, the chances are at some point you will lose a brand new premium ball, and unless you're on tour, that's a pretty painful experience. But unfortunately, it's just a problem golfers have to deal with. Right, the next problem on our list relates to pockets. Now, pockets are really important for a golfer because golfers have to store a lot of different items during a round, whether it's tees, markers, pitch mark repairers, pencils, that sort of thing. And often those sorts of things can be left in your pocket for longer than you might like. So for example, maybe you're out shopping and then you suddenly realise you've left your glove in your back pocket, and you obviously feel incredibly embarrassed about it. And another problem that golfers have to deal with when it comes to pockets is perhaps leaving your scorecard in your pocket when you put your trousers through the wash. Taking your trousers out for its next outing, having put it through the wash, and then finding that you've left your scorecard in the pocket and it's turned to that horrible papery mush material that's almost impossible to get fully out of your pocket, and you spend the next few days really trying to brush everything out of there. It's a horrible feeling. Hopefully you haven't done that after your competitive round, but after your social round you might have left your scorecard in there. So that's one of the big problems, golfers leaving things in their pockets for too long. Right, so that concludes the 10 problems that all golfers can relate to. Hopefully you really enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you give us a thumbs up by clicking the like button and comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. How many of these problems have you had to deal with, and have we missed any out? So make sure you let us know. But for now, from Burley Park Golf Club here in Stamford, it's goodbye from me. We'll see you next time.